Arrival of the Kryptonian. The sound of a crashing ship echoed through the vast, untouched forest of Middle-earth. Trees shook, the earth trembled, and the sky above fractured with bolts of unnatural light. The Kryptonian ship, a gleaming alien vessel, had fallen through the rift between worlds, its engines sputtering and wings burning as it hurtled toward the ground. In a distant clearing, the trees parted as the ship slammed into the earth with a deafening crash, sending waves of dirt and fire high into the sky. Superman, Kal-El, the last son of Krypton, emerged from the wreckage, his blackened suit glowing faintly in the sunlight. His face was stern, his posture unyielding. His eyes scanned the foreign land, feeling the weight of a world not his own. The Kryptonian heritage embedded deep within his being thrummed in his chest. But this was no longer the world he once knew. This was Middle-earth. Kal-El's senses heightened, his superhuman hearing picking up the distant sounds of war. The sky was painted in shades of crimson and orange, unnatural storms swirling overhead. The sun was a glaring red ball of light, casting sharp shadows and throwing a deep, unsettling glow across the land. Something was wrong. As he stepped forward, his boots crushed the forest floor beneath him, and his eyes narrowed as the air around him thickened with an energy unlike anything he'd encountered before. The ground vibrated beneath his feet as distant roars rumbled through the atmosphere, carrying with them the faintest trace of something familiar, dangerous. Superman rose into the air, his cape billowing behind him, and surveyed the vast, war-torn land. In the distance, dark, menacing clouds churned above a twisted fortress, casting a shadow over the land. Orcish armies roamed the battlefield, wreaking havoc upon the fragile peace of this ancient world. His fists clenched as he soared through the air, his Kryptonian heritage urging him to do something, anything, to protect the innocent. But how could he? He didn't understand the rules of this world, and in this strange land, he was an outsider, an anomaly, a god in a foreign land. He landed with a heavy thud in front of a village, its homes battered and broken from the chaos of war. The humans, watching in stunned silence, saw him as something both awe-inspiring and terrifying. But before Kal-El could speak, a blood-curdling roar echoed from the distance. The orcs were coming. Out of the trees, orc warriors emerged, snarling and charging toward him with weapons drawn. Superman narrowed his eyes, and without hesitation he stepped forward. His hands glowed with energy as he lashed out with superhuman force, disarming the first orc with a single blow. Bolg, the son of Azog, would not be far behind. Kal-El could feel it. This battle was just the beginning of a war unlike any he had fought before. A war between worlds, a battle for control, and a test of everything Superman stood for. "I am Kal-El, the last son of Krypton," he muttered to himself. "And I will protect this world, even if I don't belong here." The Orc King's challenge. The ground shook with every step as Bolg, the dreaded son of Azog, emerged from the dark, jagged mountains in the distance. His massive frame loomed against the sun, his green skin glistening with sweat and the blood of his enemies. The Orc King's eyes were filled with rage and ambition as he led his army through the shattered remnants of a once thriving village. His sword, stained with the blood of countless warriors, gleamed with deadly intent. Superman hovered above the chaos, his glowing red eyes scanning the battlefield. He had just dispatched a dozen orcs with ease, but the enemy he had sensed in the air was more than just an ordinary warrior. Kal-El's instincts told him this was the one who led the destruction, the one behind the growing wave of carnage sweeping across Middle-earth. The earth trembled beneath Superman's feet as Bolg's war cry pierced the air. With one swift motion, he threw his monstrous spear into the ground, signaling his forces to halt. His glowing eyes locked onto Kal-El as he stepped forward, the brutal weight of his armor clanking with each stride. "You are far from home, Kryptonian," Bolg growled, his voice a low, guttural growl that resonated through the earth. "I do not know what magic brought you here, but I will end you as I have ended so many others." Superman floated down slowly, his cape trailing in the wind, his fists clenched. The words of Bolg were meaningless to him, but there was something in the Orc King's stance, the confidence, the bloodlust, that told Kal-El he wasn't facing just another orc. This was a being of immense strength, forged by years of battle and hatred. "I'm not here to fight you, Bolg," Superman said, his voice calm but firm. "But if I have to, I will. You've hurt innocent people. You've destroyed everything in your path." Bolg's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a snarl. "Innocence," he laughed cruelly. "What do you know of innocence, Kryptonian? I was born in war. I was forged in blood. You, with your shining armor and your hero's heart, have no place here. With a roar, Bolg charged forward, swinging his massive sword towards Superman with the fury of 1,000 storms. The blow was swift, but Superman was faster, dodging the strike with ease. The force of the attack was enough to send shockwaves through the ground, sending debris flying in every direction. Superman retaliated with a swift jab to Bolg's chest, but the Orc King's armor absorbed the blow, barely making a dent. Bolg snarled, undeterred, and swung again, this time aiming for Superman's head. Kal-El blocked the attack with his forearm, but the sheer force of the strike pushed him back, leaving a crack in the earth beneath his feet. "I've faced worse than you," Superman said through gritted teeth, his eyes glowing brighter. He pushed himself back up, tightening his fists. "But you won't win this fight, Bolg. Not on my watch." Bolg's eyes blazed with fury. "Then let's see who the true king is, Kryptonian." With that, the battle between two titans erupted into full force. Fists colliding, the ground shaking with every impact, and the very sky above echoing with the sound of their war cries. But as the battle raged on, Superman couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Bolg was powerful, but his forces were vast. The war had just begun, and Kal-El knew that he would have to fight not just for Middle-earth, but for the future of both his worlds. "I will stop you," Superman muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing. "No matter what it takes." War of the Worlds. The ground beneath Superman's feet cracked, the impact of Bolg's blow still reverberating in the earth. The battle had escalated beyond the two warriors' fury. The very fabric of Middle-earth was beginning to tremble under the weight of the conflict. It was as if the land itself was torn between the force of the Kryptonian and the relentless Orc King. Bolg grinned, his teeth bared, the blood of his enemies staining his armor. His eyes burned with the desire to prove his superiority. "You are a man of steel," he spat, his voice laced with disdain. "But even steel can be shattered." Superman wiped the blood from his lip, unfazed. "I'm not here to destroy. I'm here to protect. If I have to fight you to do that, then so be it." The two clashed once more, their bodies colliding with a force that sent shockwaves through the battlefield. Superman's fists connected with Bolg's chest, but the Orc King absorbed the blows, his hardened body an embodiment of pure rage. Bolg retaliated with a brutal swipe of his sword, the blade scraping against Superman's indestructible skin. The impact sent Superman skidding back, creating a deep trench in the earth. As they fought, the sounds of war surrounded them. The Orc armies, emboldened by Bolg's ferocity, surged forward, attacking villages and towns in a relentless wave. The forces of Rohan and Gondor, knowing they were outnumbered, desperately tried to rally together, but they could feel the crushing power of the Orcish legions. Superman, sensing the shift in momentum, gritted his teeth. "This isn't just about you, Bolg," he said, catching his breath. "You're not just destroying my world, you're bringing hell to Middle-earth." Bolg sneered. "This is my world now, Kryptonian. The old kingdoms will fall, and a new era will rise from the ashes. And you." He lunged forward with his blade, aiming for Superman's throat. "You will kneel or die." Superman dodged, his speed leaving a blur in the air. He grabbed Bolg by the arm, throwing him into the ground with a force that cracked the earth beneath them. Bolg snarled, rolling to his feet, his eyes glowing with a malevolent fury. But Superman knew that this wasn't just a battle of strength. It was a war of ideologies. Bolg's thirst for power was all-consuming, while Superman's resolve was unyielding. He wasn't fighting for victory. He was fighting to protect. The people of Middle-earth were caught in the middle of a war they didn't choose, and Superman would not let them suffer any longer. As the two continued their vicious battle, the skies above began to change. Dark clouds rolled in, swirling with unnatural force. The ominous presence of Sauron's forces loomed over the horizon. Black riders on winged beasts descended from the sky, their dark cloaks flowing in the wind. The Orc armies continued to march, following Bolg's orders with brutal precision. Realizing that their battle was becoming secondary, Superman turned his attention to the incoming threat. "This isn't just about us anymore," he said, locking eyes with Bolg. "There's something worse coming, something much worse." Bolg's gaze followed Superman's, and for a moment, even the Orc King hesitated. Then he chuckled darkly. "Let them come. The true war begins now." The forces of darkness and destruction began to gather, and the War of Two Worlds was about to reach its most devastating stage. Superman and Bolg would soon face not only each other, but also the greater evil that threatened to consume them both. The future of Middle-earth, and perhaps the fate of two worlds, would be decided on this battlefield. The final battle. The storm above Middle-earth raged with fury, dark clouds swirling ominously as the final confrontation loomed. The land itself seemed to tremble beneath the approaching force. Superman stood tall on the battlefield, his cape billowing violently in the wind, eyes glowing with determination. His chest heaved with exertion, his body battered but unbroken. Bolg stood across from him, his monstrous frame outlined against the fiery sky, his orcish sword gleaming with a deathly sheen. The battle had been long, but this was the moment they had been fighting for, the moment when the fate of Middle-earth would be decided. Bolg's laughter echoed through the battlefield, a sound that sent chills down Superman's spine. "You think you can stop me, Kryptonian? This land is mine, and I am its king. No one, not even a god, can stand in my way." Superman's gaze hardened. "I don't fight for titles, Bolg. I fight for those who can't protect themselves. I fight for the innocent." With a roar, Bolg charged forward, his massive sword swinging through the air like a vengeful storm. Superman dodged the first blow with lightning speed, his hands glowing with Kryptonian energy as he countered with a powerful strike to Bolg's chest. The impact sent Bolg stumbling back, but his rage only fueled his strength. "You will bow to me," Bolg screamed, swinging his sword in a wild arc. Superman blocked the attack with his arm, but the sheer force sent shockwaves through the battlefield. Bolg's strength was unmatched, his brutality honed by years of war and bloodshed. Superman's heart raced as he fought back, pushing himself to the limits of his strength. Every punch sent ripples through the air, the sound of metal on metal ringing in Superman's ears. Bolg was relentless, each attack stronger than the last, but Superman refused to give up. Suddenly, Bolg's sword struck Superman's side, cutting deep into his flesh. The pain was searing, but Kal-El pushed through it, his determination unwavering. He staggered back, his vision blurred by the blood trickling down his side, but he knew this battle wasn't over. "Bolg, this ends now," Superman shouted, his voice booming with a newfound resolve. With a roar, Superman lunged at Bolg, catching him off guard. Their bodies collided, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. Superman's heat vision burned brightly, a deadly beam of pure energy that collided with Bolg's armor, sending sparks flying. Bolg staggered, his armor cracked and smoking from the intensity of the blast. But Bolg's strength was not easily defeated. He retaliated with a swift, brutal punch, knocking Superman to the ground. The impact created a massive crater in the earth, dust and debris flying in every direction. Superman lay on the ground, struggling to rise, his body screaming with exhaustion. "You're weaker than I thought," Bolg taunted, his cruel grin widening. "But it doesn't matter. You're done." Just as Bolg raised his sword for the final strike, Superman's eyes flared with an intense, blinding light. With a burst of energy, he shot upward, crashing into Bolg with the force of 1,000 suns. The two collided in midair, and for a moment, there was only light, a blinding flash of power and fury. When the light faded, Superman stood over Bolg, his breathing heavy but his stance unwavering. Bolg lay defeated, his body broken and lifeless, his once proud roar silenced forever. The battlefield fell still. The war was over. Middle-earth had been saved, but at a cost. Superman stood victorious, but the weight of the battle weighed heavily on him. Bolg was gone, but the scars of the war would remain. Superman looked out across the field, his thoughts with the people of Middle-earth who had suffered because of this war. He had won the battle, but the true challenge was just beginning. He had to help rebuild this world, to ensure that the peace they had fought for would endure. As Superman flew toward the horizon, the sun began to rise, casting light over the war-torn land. The shadows of the past began to fade, and a new dawn began for both worlds. Legacy of two worlds. The battlefield was silent now. The once roiling storm above had begun to clear, revealing a fractured sky, the remnants of the cosmic rift that had allowed Superman to step into Middle-earth. The land was scarred, the echoes of war still lingering in the air. Yet, amidst the destruction, there was an undeniable stillness. The storm was over. Superman stood alone, his cape fluttering in the faint breeze. His chest heaved with exhaustion, his body battered, his Kryptonian blood mixing with the dust of Middle-earth. But his heart remained steady, knowing that the battle had been won. The Orc King Bolg, the source of so much chaos, was no more. The orc armies had been shattered, and peace, though fragile, had returned. But as Kal-El stood among the wreckage, the weight of the war still pressed upon him. The innocent lives lost, the towns destroyed, the families shattered. This wasn't the world he had known, but for a brief moment, it had been his to protect. He had chosen to stay and fight, to stand against tyranny. But was this truly his fight? Was he meant to remain here in a world so far removed from his own? Lois Lane, who had been caught in the rift, stood by his side, her face reflecting the same weariness he felt. She had fought beside him through this strange and violent world, becoming part of its history in ways neither of them had anticipated. Yet, now that the war was over, the question remained. Would they return to their home? Would Superman return to Earth? "Clark," Lois said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've done more than anyone could have asked for. You saved this world. But, is it time to go home?" Superman's gaze shifted toward the horizon. Middle-earth was a land of beauty and brutality. It was a world of fantasy and pain, where heroes and villains were born from the blood of war. And while he had helped bring peace to it, he knew his duty was far from over. There were still threats, still dangers, and still hope to be found. Not just for this world, but for his own. "I don't know," he said quietly, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "This world, it's not mine. I don't belong here. But I couldn't turn my back on it." Lois nodded, understanding. "You're more than just a hero, Clark. You're someone who believes in the goodness of people, no matter where they come from." Superman turned his gaze back to the people of Middle-earth, who had gathered to celebrate their victory. They were battered, scarred, but they were alive. They would rebuild. They would heal. He wasn't their king. He wasn't their god. But for a time, he had been their protector. And that was enough. "You're right," Kal-El said, a soft smile breaking through his weariness. "But there's still work to be done. Not just here, but at home. Earth needs me too." Lois smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "Then it's time for us to go home. Together." As Superman and Lois stood side by side, the sun rose over the horizon, bathing the land in a new light. A light that symbolized not just the end of war, but the beginning of a new hope for two worlds. With one final glance at the land that had tested him beyond measure, Superman took to the skies once more, his cape billowing in the wind. The legacy of his time in Middle-earth would live on, not in statues or tales, but in the hearts of those he had protected. He had shown them the meaning of hope, of strength, and of sacrifice. As he soared into the clouds, the sunlight glistened around him, casting an eternal glow over both worlds. Kal-El knew that his legacy would never fade, that the truth of who he was would remain not just in the hearts of the people, but in the very fabric of the universe itself. The last son of Krypton had come to this world as a stranger, but he left it as a hero,